Hello everyone, my name is Ashley Griffith. I will be talking about Ted Bundy for the criminal behavior analysis for the final project. Starting off with the introduction, talking about Ted Bundy, he is one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. He confessed to murdering more than 30 young women during the 1970s. A lot of investigators believe that the true number was actually higher than that though. Bundy was known for his intelligence, charm, and the ability to manipulate others, which definitely allowed him to gain victims' trust before attacking and killing them. And instead of only just describing his crimes as a whole, criminology and psychology kind of dive into trying to explain why offenders like Bundy behave and act the way they do. Ted Bundy's criminal behavior can be analyzed through a number of different development risk factors, psychological theories, biological theories, and sociological theories. All these theories help to explain how his childhood experiences, personality traits, and environment could have contributed to his violent behavior and acts. So talking about those childhood and family experiences, to start off, Ted Bundy was born in 1946. He experienced a lot of confusion and instability during his childhood. For a lot of his early life, Bundy believed that his grandparents were his real parents and that his biological mom was actually his sister. After learning the truth about his family later in life, it could have definitely caused a lot of emotional confusion and trust issues. Research in criminology shows that unstable family dynamics and emotional insecurity during childhood can definitely negatively affect emotional development and social relationships later in life. There are reports that Bundy's grandfather did display a lot of violent and aggressive behavior. So not only growing up in that unstable environment, having the also exposure to anger and aggression definitely could have influenced Bundy's understanding of relationships and control. We learned in chapters 2 and 3 for the PowerPoints the concepts that talk about childhood environment and the early experiences. They can definitely shape personality development and increase those risk factors for criminal or antisocial behavior. Now, talking about trauma and isolation, Bundy reportedly struggled socially as a teenager and often felt isolated from others. A lot of classmates described him as shy and awkward, despite that confident image he portrayed. Later in life, social rejection, isolation can definitely contribute to that emotional frustration, resentment, and just the difficulty of forming those healthy relationships. The criminology theory suggests that negative childhood experiences and poor emotional attachment can definitely increase the risk of antisocial behavior later in life. Bundy also admitted to being heavily influenced by violent pornography during his teenage years. He would claim that he repeatedly was exposed to violent material, and it definitely increased his violent fantasies over time. According to the social learning concepts, repeated exposure to violence can normalize aggressive behavior and really just influence how individuals think and act. While talking about pornography, pornography alone definitely doesn't cause someone all the time to act violent or become violent, but it definitely strengthened Bundy's fantasies and unhealthy attitudes towards women and control. So pornography is just another factor into it that can contribute to those violent acts. So the risk factors linked to criminal behavior. There was definitely several important risk factors shown throughout Bundy's life, some including identity confusion or identity crisis, you could say, family instability, emotional detachment, social isolation, and just exposure to violence. A lot of these factors could have affected his emotional development and ability to form empathy for others. Topics that we discussed in class explain that when multiple development risk factors are shown together, the likelihood of antisocial behavior definitely can increase. Bundy's crimes also demonstrated a really strong desire for power and control. He used manipulation for victims and just had no remorse for them, and those traits show emotional and psychological issues that definitely developed over a lot of years. So instead of just one single cause, Bundy's criminal behavior is definitely a lot more complex, and it appears to be a result of just multiple different risk factors instead of just one. So, the psychological theory that I think best explains Ted Bundy's behavior is definitely antisocial personality disorder, or for short, ASPD, combined with those psychopathic traits as well. ASPD is characterized by repeated criminal behavior, manipulation, impulsivity, lack of remorse, deceitfulness, and disregard for the right of others. Bundy displayed a lot of these characteristics throughout his life. An important factor with ASPD is definitely the deceitfulness and manipulation, which definitely describes Bundy. He often pretended to be injured or helpless in order to gain that trust of victims before attacking and killing them. Another major characteristic is definitely the lack of remorse, which he definitely shows. She showed very little genuine empathy for any of his victims and often would blame outside influences for his acts rather than just accepting the full responsibility. Talking about psychopathia, it often includes the traits of superficial charm, emotional detachment, lack of guilt. Bundy was definitely described as intelligent, calm, and charismatic in public, which helped him to hide his violent behavior. He was capable of living a seemingly normal life. He had a girlfriend. That girlfriend had a child. He was acting towards kind of like a father figure to that child while secretly committing those violent acts on the side. These traits fit strongly with the psychological theories of psychopathia. Talking about the biological theory, biological theory suggests that genetic, neurological functioning, and brain abnormalities could contribute to criminal behavior. Some experts believe that Bundy had biological factors related to impulsivity, emotional regulation, and aggression. Research on violent offenders often examined possible differences in brain function connected to empathy, emotional control, and decision making, and kind of comparing those to a normal brain, someone who doesn't have the lack of empathy, someone who has that emotional control, and someone who has that decision making. So the examiners look into the different parts of the brain for those serial killers to see if there is a difference. However, biology, alone definitely cannot explain Bundy's crimes. A lot of individuals may have a lot of biological risk factors, but they don't always become violent and commit those violent acts. Biological theories are strongest when combined with different influences, such as the psychological or environmental influences. Talking about Bundy's case, biological tendencies may have interacted with those childhood experiences and personality traits to definitely increase that violent behavior. Talking now about the sociological theory, the social learning theory helps explain Bundy's criminal behavior. This theory talks about behavior can be learned through observation, reinforcement, and experiences. Bundy's repeated violent fantasies and exposure to that violent pornography material may have gradually normalized aggression and control in his mind. Over time, the violent thoughts may have become emotionally rewarding and reinforce that repeated behavior. The social learning theory also talks about when harmful behaviors are repeated and reinforced internally, they can definitely become stronger over time. So Bundy's crimes appeared to escalate in frequencies and severity, which supports the idea that his violent behavior definitely developed gradually rather than just appearing out of nowhere. To conclude this presentation, Ted Bundy's criminal behavior can be understood through a bunch of different development risk factors and multiple criminological theories. Talking about his unstable childhood, his identity crisis, emotional isolation, and that exposure to violence definitely affected his emotional and psychological development. Psychological theories, especially talking about antisocial personality disorders, or APD, and psychopathia, definitely provide the strongest explanation for that manipulation he had, the lack of empathy, and the deceitfulness, as well as the violent behavior. Those biological theories suggest possible influences involving that aggression and emotional control, while the sociological theories explain how learned behavior and violent fantasies definitely developed over time. Overall, Bundy's case shows that criminal behavior is usually caused by multiple interacting factors rather than just one single cause, which is what makes these serial killers so confusing, because it's never just one single cause. It's always a bunch of different factors that collect together and make them the way they are and cause them to commit those violent acts. His crimes demonstrate how childhood experiences, personality disorders, environmental influences, and learned behaviors can all be combined, like I was saying, to create that serious violent criminality, those violent acts. Studying cases like Ted Bundy definitely helps criminologists and psychologists better understand those violent offenders and try to understand and try and prevent anything happening in the future. So improve prevention, profiling, and intervention strategies in the future to help this not happen again. And these are my references, and thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.